Hi, everybody. Adrian Fuentes here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
Let's officially welcome our speaker today, and Rocque Perez, and he is representing Ward 5 in the city of Tucson, and he's been appointed to that position. And he's an advocate for education in all forms as the means to inspire informed and engaged communities. With a background in marketing and communications, he has dedicated his career thus far to improving the educational environment as a place for anyone to learn, work, and support their community. Previously, as the executive director of the Pima College Access Network, Rocque led initiatives to enhance post-secondary education access across Tucson and Pima County. His role builds on his experience in public affairs and organizational development within the state's public higher education system. Previously, Rocque managed outreach and communications at Arizona State University's Office of the University Provost, focusing on inclusive excellence and its role as a Hispanic serving institution. Before ASU, he served as a marketing strategist at the University of Arizona under the Senior Vice President for Research and Innovation, contributing to the university's research visibility in areas of space exploration, resource resiliency, and diversity among those facilitating impacts and benefiting from them. Let's give Rocque an official warm welcome to Democrats of Greater Tucson.
Hi
And
everyone, thank you for having me. So that was very long. I don't know where that was pulled from. Was that pulled from LinkedIn?
you
Um,
did great.
okay. Well, so I guess I wanna just start off with hello. Thank you for having me. I know that we had something scheduled before, and there was a little bit of a mishap there on my part, but I'm incredibly thankful for the opportunity to plug in today. Again, my name is I go by Rocky. I hear Rocque, Rocky. I hear it all. I go by it all. Um, it was incredibly shocked and deeply honored to have been able to assume this role in May. I was appointed on May 6th after a application process and was unanimously appointed by mayor and council to fill out the remainder of former council members' term until December 1. Right now I am coming in from, I know that you had mentioned the Pima College Access Network. That's actually a sub-program within the Metro Education Commission, which is a shared body and nonprofit that was established between the city of Tucson and Pima County. And so it's actually within that role that I really got to focus on everything from the civic and academic empowerment programs, like our Teen Town Hall, like our youth fellowship, our peer coach program, and all of our different college access programming within Pima County schools. And so, though I stepped out as the executive director, I still oversee the Education Commission as its city council liaison. And so, I still kind of operate within that space. But to the point that was made, my background has largely been focused on supporting learners in their journeys as engaged citizens. And so, for me, when I was in high school, I had actually been in my senior year when there came the opportunity to go to what's called a teen town hall. And for me, that was in the midst of, I think, just the starting actually of Trump's announcement for his race in 2016. So I think that was maybe back in 2015, early 2015, and had been able to attend that teen town hall. And, there was some familiar folks like Patrick Robles, who in tandem with I had really pressured some of our public officials at the time about how we were going to respond to some of the rhetoric that was happening in our community, how we ultimately wanted to engage young people to take part in the civic process to kind of fight that fight. And I think really that's where some of my initial interests in public service has began, not necessarily as a public official, but service, and really trying to, I think, advocate for my community. So kind of fast forward, come the 2017, 2016 election, and obviously the Democrats' loss, I, like many of my peers, were infuriated, disheartened. We went through all of the stages of grief, but I knew that I really wanted to ensure that I was supporting my peers and plugging in with their community, understanding the consequences of elections like that. And, really, I think through both part-time jobs, my studies at the U of A, was really around, I think, trying to learn about institutions, how to navigate them. And I think through my work was really trying to inform people how different levels of government served them or aimed and aspired to serve them. Um, so fast forward beyond the initial years of my undergrad, I'd been working at U of A as a student in the government community relations office when the pandemic hit, and I ultimately was let go amongst another group of folks. Um, and kind of leaned all in into my undergraduate program in political science. And I ended up taking a congressional internship in Congressman Tom O'Halloran's office in DC. And my first day was January 6th. And that kind of exploded my undergraduate experience. I thought, I was going to have a really awesome time talking about all the things that Tom O'Halloran had under his belt as someone who, I think was relatively, well, I think back then, what was considered center left. And I think what was exciting was being able to tap into his background in technology and education and conservation. I think it was a full spectrum of things that I've historically been very interested in. And it quickly turned into, what do you think about Andy Biggs and what's going on with Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema? Do you have any comments on this and that? And I think it was a different level of contention than I had signed up for. And I ended up dropping from that internship, and as a result, also dropping in my academic credits for that year. And so I essentially dropped out of school because of that experience. And luckily, folks from U of A brought me back full time, and I was able to tap into some of the tuition benefits that U of A offered. But I was working and we were doing some good work. And so that's when I really got to plug into higher ed, which is, I think, of equal interest to me in terms of my passions for education as well as, politics. And was able to jump into the research enterprise. And so my focus was really serving the senior VP for research, and really got to support her in not only just her marketing communications, but I think a lot of the strategy around how we were bridging the university's research assets. So everything from tech parks to the museums, the Gem and Mineral Museum, Biosphere 2. And then one of my bigger focuses was the university's connection to NASA and all of its projects in partnership with NASA. So, it steered in a little bit of a different direction there. But I think, those experiences, I think both in terms of navigating political strife as a student, being able to, I think, assimilate all of the resources and work that the university kind of undertook to, I think, care for our community, our resources, um, advance our capabilities. I think were stepping stones for my appreciation for, um, the people and the place that have cared for me. And I think equally how I would come to try to care for it within, I think, this role as an example. But my journey within higher ed didn't end at U of A. I eventually was recruited um, by ASU. And so I'd actually worked under the provost and the president up there, helped them get their Hispanic serving institution designation with the Department of Ed, and really got to bring in some really awesome funding opportunities to kind of support Hispanic students in their learning journeys. Eventually the opportunity to become the executive director for the Education Commission came across my lap. And, I think at the time, that organization had kind of been, I think, on the tail end of, I think, a lot of discussion around whether or not to get rid of it. And I think that just coming from higher ed, I saw a gap within the landscape of college access programming and support systems within Arizona. And I knew that Southern Arizona specifically, really needed a support system, and I think a focal point for a number of different organizations to come together. And so we've been able to kind of bring that up over the last year. We have a peer coach program that helps kids apply for college, navigate different scholarship opportunities, things like that. We went from 23 peer coaches in just a handful of schools to this next academic year, increasing up to 73 peer coaches in every single public high school within Pima County, which is exciting. We have our teen town hall. Again, that's how I got plugged in. So being able to afford an equal opportunity for kids to engage with elected officials, learn about different resources and agencies in the community. Um, and then the forthcoming Tucson Teen Congress. So an opportunity for kids to sign up, to learn about local government, engage with elected officials, help facilitate events like the Teen Town Hall, things like that. So I come into this role now, having understood what um, you know parts are at play when it comes to um, needing to reactivate communities and trying to bring folks together and finding synergies between different groups and silos. And I think that I'm coming in at a time where Ward 5 specifically does feel a little bit disconnected, but all the more uh, I think, energetic for the races that are underway, the need that there's a clear ask for, while also combating some of the really prevalent issues like homelessness and substance misuse, that are really prevalent here within Ward 5. And so I think right now what I'm really excited about in the next month or so is we're going to be launching a Ward 5 grant initiative where essentially we'll be opening up competitive processes for small businesses, for programs and events, and then different nonprofit agencies to kind of compete for different funding opportunities and service to our Ward 5 community. So I'm really excited about that. I think in kind of an effort to reactivate some of the engagement between the Ward 5 community and the Ward 5 council office. So really excited there as well. I think that's maybe what I would cover there. I think the last thing is on the horizon. I know that there is likely a pursuit of mine to jump into an election race come December. Still figuring out which particular one, but lots of exciting things, I think, in the month ahead.
Well, thank you for sharing the scope of what happened on January 6th, and how, that was consequential to your decision making. And it's really neat that U of A stepped up and you were able to work with them. And but were you actually in the building when?
Yeah, no, I never even got to make it inside, for obvious reasons. I think at the time, it was about 10:30 a.m. Was about to head out. And luckily at the time, I didn't even sign a lease, because I was going to be there for about a 6-month term. And I think at the time I was just staying with a family with a friend who had family up there until I got past my first week and would have eventually signed a lease, but thank God I didn't. Ended up just making my way out the door when I saw the flurry of news come in and just had to text someone and say, "Hey, do we go in still?" And the answer was evidently no. And mind you, Tom O'Halloran, I think actually had just stepped off of the House floor. I think he was the second to last speaker before they eventually started to make their way in. And I think Kirsten Sinema might have been second to last on the Senate floor. So there's a lot happening, obviously. But yeah, very consequential, I think, experience for me, and I think a really huge tipping point in my journey.
What votes do you anticipate you'll be part of between now and December? And what do you see for yourself in 26?
So, I think right off the bat, I knew coming in that I was going to be um, one of the uh, folks that would have been under a lot of pressure, given that I coming in, knew that I would be a tie-breaking vote on a number of issues. When Councilman Fimbres was towards the tail end of his term, there was a couple of votes that had ultimately failed because he had been president but didn't ultimately vote on them. So, I think that those either have already been reintroduced or are likely to come. I know that the ordinance on encampments and parks and washes was one of great interest that we did eventually end up voting on. There's a lot of, I think, subsequent actions in response to how we are continuing support for the unhoused community after that ordinance are underway. But on the horizon, there's everything from things like Project Blue in the city's side of that two-part deal with the county. There's things like the conversation on public transit and whether or not to reinstate fees. There's a number of different things that are on the horizon on everything from public transit to the public utility conversation. And those are all, I think, really hard things for me to navigate as a first time person stepping into this space, all issues that I care really deeply about. And I think also worth noting that a lot of these things, the conversation around public utility, the city's actions relative to the big change in the RTA with the new executive director and things like that. I think those are all really huge turning points for Tucson in that, it's not every couple of years we get a new franchise agreement with Tucson Electric Power. It's not every year that we get new leadership at the RTA. So there's a lot of change underway and it's happening right now.
Yeah. My follow-up on that would be as an appointed rather than elected representative of Ward 5, do you feel like you would be inclined to recuse yourself of any of those votes?
So, I think that's a dilemma that I struggle with internally, and that, obviously I was appointed, and I think that the downside to that is people who are typically elected, they carry a mandate in having, been in a role for or having acclimated into a role. I think, obviously it comes with being elected or appointed, but really I think it's an acclimation process and it's you're becoming of that position. And I think though I was not elected, I think that, just living in Ward 5, having worked with our school districts and our neighborhood associations, I think having the consult of my team who is very plugged in, and I think also just continuing to have conversations with folks that live within Ward 5. I do feel that there is a clear ask from folks, and so I don't feel inclined to recuse myself necessarily. But I think, have to look at things from a different lens because I am cognizant of the fact of how much of this might be my own interests versus that of my what would be my constituents that elect me, right? So I think I'm balancing a lot there, and I think that's just a perpetual struggle throughout this process.
Okay. Okay, Lillian, welcome.
Yeah. Rocky, what's your position on Project Blue?
Yeah, so I'm still plugging in with a number of folks. I think that for me specifically, I was at ASU when the university had been courting alongside the municipalities up there to bring in what became some of the data centers that are now in Mesa and Chandler and other parts of the Phoenix metro area. And so, I think that if you've been really plugged in, and you might have seen some of the remarks from, say, Jen Allen at the County Board of Supervisors, she brought up some really great points in that there have been officials who have retroactively expressed, regret. And I think a large part of that was at the time of their approval, there wasn't necessarily any regulations to these centers before the development process began. And so, I think after the fact, what I have been trying to learn a little bit more about is in the case of, regardless of how I vote, knowing that there are processes and regulations in place should the event that ever does pass. So everything from certain parameters on water consumption, around energy consumption, about noise relative to the actual surrounding areas. There's a lot of different things at play here. And so for me, I don't necessarily feel compelled to approve Project Blue if it came before the table within the next couple of weeks. Mind you, we don't meet in July um, without more information. I think right now there's just not a lot of insight. We're not going to ever know who the company that is ultimately going to reside in that space is going to be until after it's approved. So we're operating with this with, I think a little bit of a lack of transparency there. And I think realistically, whatever they do provide, it's ranges. It's not exact numbers, so as to not realistically identify who the potential company will be. So that's a really tough one that I'm really spending a lot of time.
Yeah, I like your answer. That's a good answer. I
Yeah.
would suggest you
But
look at Nikki Lee's, newsletter. She has a background in artificial intelligence, and she lists all the questions that the city council needs to know before they approve this. Because you're right, the county approved it with virtually no information about it. And so it's a real risky proposition. I'll send you a copy of her newsletter. And I
I
think
get it. I get it. And
Okay.
I talk to Nikki often. But and I think what's really cool about Nikki is that in this process she actually began taking a water I think what is it called? A water consumption scarcity, a kind of class around water consumption and conservation, which I think was really awesome. And I think Nikki is obviously paying particular focus to this, not just because that's part of her background, but also because Project Blue would ultimately be within her ward. I think for me in particular, I'm cognizant of the fact that Ward 5 is the second closest to that project. If there was to be residential areas that were of concern, we would be the second closest number of residential communities there. But I'm also of particular interest in that, and I'm unsure if the actual diagrams have been publicized, and I know that I'm able to talk about this, is that what I really liked is when we were looking at the map of the ultimate project starting point, and it's the water infrastructure making its way from like near I would say like near the Ward 5 office all the way down through and passing along golf links, making its way down to Royales, forgot what that area is, and then down to Project Blue. I think it sets a lot of really good infrastructure in place to do a lot of what's been covered on the water positive contributions and really I think building out economic development infrastructure or infrastructure that could improve some of our economic development prospects in the future that could make their way as a result of heightened possibilities with this project coming in if it did?
The problem is these data centers use gigantic amounts of water, and we have a water shortage. We're in trouble on water. They'll also drive up our electricity rates. And we can survive without Project Blue, but we can't survive without water, and we can't survive without affordable electricity to pay for our air conditioning. You know, picture what Tucson would be like if the electricity wasn't, you know, the cost of the electricity was a problem and people couldn't afford to
Mm.
air condition their homes. There's a lot of risk with Project Blue, and they've been secretive. And Ricky Lee's newsletter is here are the questions I need answers to. And they're smart answers because I come from a data processing background too. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Just apropos of your mention of Jen Allen, she's going to be on with us next week talking about Project Blue. And we'd love to have Nikki on too. So yeah, absolutely pass it on.
Good. Good.
Get hold of Nikki and see if she wants to do a special sometime, maybe next week or the week after that.
Okay, do we have any questions in the chat?
Nope, not thus far. Bridget's got her hand up.
Bridget, how you doing? You have a
Great.
question or?
I do have a question. Hello, Rocky. You have worked for a number of years in education and obviously with young people. And you have political aspirations going forward, as you stated today. Can you please tell us about your commitment to the full range of reproductive justice for men, women, and teens?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, and I'm not positioned to like go way deep in that, but I mean, I would say that I probably stand in solidarity with the majority of my colleagues in the community, and that, you know, I think that folks have a right to make decisions about their bodies in a way that you know, makes sense for them, I think within the parameters of their age group. And so, you know, I think that we're seeing a huge disinvestment in some of those resources to allow people to access their needs, both medically through some of their personal needs. And, you know, that's really disheartening. But, you know, I think for me in particular, with my time at the Education Commission, though, we focused a lot on, I think, helping kids in their post-secondary journeys and getting plugged into the local community. I think there's an inherent part of that of wanting to ensure that they are safe and uh, uh, they are of wellness physically and mentally. And I think a large part of that is pointing them to resources that are available to them and having tough conversations with kids. And so, you know, I think I've been very supportive in that, and I think that would continue to be a track going forward.
And I just want to be very specific here. You support access to a full range of reproductive health care services, including abortion.
Yeah. Yep,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, and let's see.
I don't see any hands up or any questions in the chat, so I'd be willing to pose a question if you'd entertain.
Sure, jump in.
Given your background in higher education and science education, I'm wondering what your thoughts and feelings are about the Trump's attacks on higher education and our scientific process in our universities.
Can you walk back a little bit? You said Trump's
attacks. His
attacks.
efforts
Got it.
to basically, attack our higher education.
I thought you said tax. I was like, he's trying to tax universities.
Tax too?
No. Yeah. No. You know, I think it's really unfortunate. You know, so, you know, I think there's a number of things that I could touch on there, but kind of walking back to the Education Commission, our peer coach program has been largely fueled by AmeriCorps. And can I see maybe for those that have their cameras on, raise their hands if they know what AmeriCorps is? Yeah. Yep. So, you know, I think AmeriCorps, I think, has been a phenomenal partner for us in that we're all about instilling service and pursuing learning pathways as a means to, I think, identify a path of service of most meaning to every single individual. And our peer coaches take on a term of service through AmeriCorps. And again, they are the ones that are helping their peers in looking at different academic programs, in completing their financial aid applications, their federal financial aid applications, looking for other resources to go to college, and then the next steps to actually get there. Just through my personal work, I was really disheartened right off the bat, come January, when, for the first time through the Education Commission, I was bringing a $2.1 million investment from the Department of Ed, that had been historically invested within the Phoenix metro area to support low-income kids in accessing higher education. And that grant opportunity had been essentially withdrawn second day with Trump in office. And that was a part of the immediate cuts undertaken by the Doge, by Doge. I think that those are things that are clearly consequential to Arizona, to our local community. But even I think in terms of, like, say, the financial aid application, you have a number of there's millions of dollars in unclaimed federal financial aid for students every year. And I think Pima County only gets about 40% of students, of graduating seniors, to actually even apply for that aid. And we saw for the first time our numbers go from 40% completion down to about 36 completion. There's never been a decline. There's only ever been an increase in completion, because that's how progress works in that spectrum. Students, I think, come the beginning of February, had been retroactively rejected in their application for federal aid. And that was because these students either didn't include a gender. They might have just said, I prefer not to say, or they potentially might have indicated that they identified as something different than what their government documents might say. And so they were retroactively rejected based off of contention around gender identity. And then there was even more students who were retroactively rejected because, although they were a citizen, they are citizens, they have a social security number, they were born in the US, they have a parent who might not be, or who might have not been a US resident, might not have a social security number, whatever that circumstance is. And then there's a number of folks in between. There's unhoused students, youth on their own, things like that. And those kids were also retroactively rejected. So, I think just in that whole area, it's been really disheartening to see folks being disenfranchised and just accessing higher ed. And then I think for those that are actually in it, right? I'm sending a new cohort of all of our peer coaches and youth fellows into their freshman years of college. And I've had so many of them that are like, oh yeah, I'm going to um, uh, 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 John Hopkins, I'm going to Stanford, I'm going to UCLA, I'm going to ASU and U of A. And a lot of them have prospects in health sciences and in doing research, because these kids have been lucky to get the cream of the crop, and then are finding out, oh, these programs are being disfunded. So I'm going into this and not even being able to actually do what I thought I was going to do when I got there. And then even just being someone who worked within the research space, seeing dollars disinvested in things like resource resiliency and water research, particularly in a region that has specialized in this, needs it in a time where water consumption is increasingly, conversations around water consumption are increasingly needed within this part of the country. So, to answer your question, very disappointed. And I even just put out a op-ed with our Vice Mayor Lane Santa Cruz today about our particular universities in Arizona kind of acquiescing to the Trump administration when it comes to defending itself from some of these disinvestments, and complying with rules and putting up no fight in that process, unlike many institutions across the country. So very nuanced issue, very disappointed in where we are, and only hopeful for folks fighting the fight that they are doing and hoping for the best.
With your background in many different educational institutions, do you think we're doing a pretty good job, a better job with remedial education?
Remedial education for you meaning?
Especially like math skills and writing skills.
Got it. So I think I have a particular interest when it comes to the focus on literacy. I think I had more recently, I did have to step off because of my appointment, but I had started out a couple months into my term as a board member for Literacy Connects. And then I think in connection to my time at MEC, just looking at the full continuum of education, um, Pima County in particular has a decreasing reading comprehension at the third grade level. And I think right now we might be at 32% um, uh, uh, reading comprehension at the level that we need it to be, and at a state level. And I think that can contribute to it does contribute to a decline in one's ability to perform academically, and maybe even socially and civically later on in life. And so, right now, um, I'm I find a lot of hope in knowing that our community in particular is very um, great at coalescing around a love of reading um, and providing books to our community. We have things like Literacy Connects, Make Way for Books, Tucson Festival of Books. The list goes on. But at a systems level in our schools, our state has not invested in this particular area in the way that it needs to. And so, I think that there is an exciting election coming up in the next few years for a new Arizona state school superintendent or separate superintendent of education. And I think that folks really need to pay attention to that race come this next cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Apropos of that, I'm already in contact with several of our candidates for PI, and we have a couple of them scheduled in September. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, Terry is the one of interest for me, just being frank. She's coming from Education Forward Arizona, which is essentially like the state's education advocacy organization, and in tandem with MEC, Education Forward has been a phenomenal partner. I think like Terry, we both have been operating in these public education spaces and do feel compelled to enter into this kind of space because there is a fight to fight through other means. And so I'm excited for her personally, but I know that there's a number of folks, and all of them would be a step up from what we have now.
Anything.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite topics is metro government,
Mhm.
regional government. At one time there were city libraries and there were county libraries. Now it's really that might not be the best example, but could you see fire being under one roof? Could you see law enforcement being under one roof? Could you see Parks and Rec, being under one roof?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I think what's and I think there's never been a more opportune time than right now, is that I think in the very um contentious political landscape that we're in the scarcity of resources, in the changing of leadership, and then I think a lot of major contractual, um, us kind of reaching the tail end of major contractual obligations coming into the fray, I think has really afforded Tucson and Pima County in particular to start thinking about how are we coming together to consolidate resources and do things a little bit more strategically. And so, I think prior to my time on city council, just looking outward or looking inward from the outside, when it came to investments on our neighborhoods, on our recreation centers, on early childhood education, I have felt that there is an increasing need for us to think a little bit more intentionally on using space, on using personnel, on using program funding. And so I am a bit hopeful for where we're headed. The Pima early childhood education program that Adalita Grijalva, Rex Scott, and a number of other folks had come together to eventually form, I think is a really good example of, some shared resource pooling. But I think what that is an example, a point that I think has been prompted by our folks on mayor and council is what are we chartered to do? Right? Like Pima County does not have a charter. It follows a framework that was established by the state legislature. The city has a charter. It has a mandate. And I think that if anything, maybe there's some room for opportunity for us to revisit that charter. But ultimately, the money that we have, it has a mandate. So I think anything plus is a matter of what capacity can afford. And I think that we're having those conversations right now.
Yeah, there's actually one city that I've lived in Las Vegas where they did combine the city police department with the county sheriff's department.
Yeah.
And I'll have to make a couple calls, see how that's going.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm genuinely very interested in that right now. I think just with Ward 5 specifically, unlike all the rest of the wards, there is a completely separate municipality smack down in the middle of my ward, South Tucson.
Yes.
And they
Okay.
utilize a lot of our resources to no benefit to the city, right? Our police department, our fire department, they ultimately provide comprehensive support to the detriment of our folks because our infrastructure, our allocation process, our budgeting is specific to our population within Ward 5, not including that entirely different local government. And so, right now, what I'm excited for is that for the first time, Tucson and South Tucson are actually coming together to form an MOU to really formalize what that process looks like, both in terms of budgeting and the practice of supporting that area. So that's just an even closer example of what's happening within Tucson and more closely what's happening within my ward.
Great.
We do have a question in the chat, and I did want to note real quickly that Rocque had referred to Teresa, and that's Dr. Teresa Levia Ruiz, who will be appearing here on August 4th. So mark your calendars for that.
Nice.
And we do have a question in the chat from Ron Benson. He wants to know, apropos the police, should the city police support ICE operations? What's your feelings?
Yeah, I think I would probably stand in solidarity with Chief Castmore on this front. I think there is a particular need to continue to, I think, collaborate with federal officers when it comes to, say, preventative measures and investigations for things like substance transportation and um, uh, just the prevalence of substances that might make their way into our region and the work that we collaboratively do to, I think, combat some of those things. But I don't think that our law enforcement needs to go above and beyond to aid practices that are unprecedented by our federal immigration officers, and ICE included. And so I think that right now Tucson is also navigating a very tough position in that if we take that stance, to what detriment is that to the very scarce resources that we already have, given that the Trump administration is already dwindling the federal investments that we do get. So, I think it's a really unfortunate circumstance to be in, but I know that it is the stance of our collective mayor and council that we not give in to the Trump administration's practices to the detriment of our community. So
Okay, let's see, do we have any other questions in the chat, Mike?
Not seeing any new questions in the chat, not seeing any hands up. I'd like to ask Rocque another question, if he doesn't mind.
Sure.
cool.
Let's see. What do you think? What are your feelings about the state legislature trying to withdraw in-state tuition from Dreamers?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because in doing that, they're undoing a mandate by the majority of Arizona voters, right? We had a proposition that was proposed and passed to afford students that opportunity for in-state tuition. And um, I think that that speaks to a larger issue of representation and confidence in the Arizona state legislature and Arizona government. So I'm a bit disheartened by that move. And I know that it will definitely be challenged legally. And so I think it's really a matter of time for us to see how and ultimately what happens with that direction. But it's disheartening.
This is not exactly your area, but based on your concern about homeless people, last year we had a wonderful little flyer thingy. It was just typing paper, and it gave you every single cooling center along with the hours that it was open and the bus route, because addresses are not real helpful to homeless people when you're walking. What they really need to know is the bus route, because that's how they get there. So it was a brilliant pamphlet. This year, there is nothing. I have seen no list of the cooling centers anywhere. And I talked to my ward office because I don't live in your ward. They didn't know what I was talking about. So can you do something to get a pamphlet out there so that people will know where the cooling centers are?
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up. We're going to be putting out some materials in regards to the cooling centers, so it's good to know that there might have already been something that was sent out. Do you, to your memory, do you recall if that was a city branded pamphlet or if it was a ward specific pamphlet?
I
Meaning
don't,
meaning
I,
that might it come from the city of Tucson or might it have come from a council member?
it might, I think it probably came from the county, but
County.
it was, yeah, it was readily available. This year, there's nothing. If you go on the county's website, you can find some information about cooling centers, but that's not real helpful to
Got it.
homeless people. Uh,
So,
a
so it came
simple
from,
little flyer is much more helpful.
so it came from the county and not the city?
I think it came from the county, but if
Okay.
the county's not doing the job, the city needs to, because most of the cooling centers are in the city.
Good to know. Okay. Yeah, then we'll have to reach out to the county and see if they might have some of that material that we could have the city send out. That's good to know.
It's like, yeah, they have something on their website, but that's totally unuseful. And when you look up this stuff on their website, there's nothing that mentions a flyer. And if they had a flyer, usually you would expect to be able to find it on their website and then print it. There's nothing.
Good to know. Yeah, so I mean that's good to know in that there's probably a definite need for that given the ordinance that had been passed.
Oh, yeah.
So I imagine our community health and safety folks needing something like that. So that's good to know. Thank you.
If you can do something about it to get something going, that would be wonderful.
Well, Rocky, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Is anything that you didn't expect come your way since you've been on the city council?
I think the the part that has been new for me, well, there's I think two big parts in that, I've always been in and working for folks that um uh, have the means to do a lot of good. And I think what has been I think a transformational moment for me is being that actual person, and having a say as to how we're making particular investments, specifically out of, say, the Ward 5 budget versus the actual city budget setting process. And so I think coming in and seeing um, a immense amount of opportunity that could be afforded to the Ward 5 community, um, given, council members Fimbreza's circumstances and what he was able to do, and ultimately what that left for me to kind of fill. So I think that's been a huge um, uh, uh, climb for me. I think other than that, I think kind of going back to the original point around having a mandate versus being appointed, I think for me, I was relatively involved in the community and I had a little bit of like a public face, I guess I could say. But it was different being launched into this space alongside the mayor, who has a huge, I think, following, for better or for worse. And I think being bundled into that space. And so having to differentiate myself and pick and choose when to ally myself is a hard battle for me every day. But I think all the more exciting and knowing that regardless of where we stand on particular issues, I think we are lock in step in the fight that we have with the Trump administration and the way that it's kind of trickled down to every level of government. So I think there's a lot of things that are at play here, and it's been awesome to figure out where I fit in all of those different parts.
Let's see. So you learn how to count up to 4 real quick. Huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. I have never had to type the same 4 names more than I'm doing right now to
Oh,
figure out
that's
who's
cool.
going where. But yeah.
One of our esteemed Democrats of Greater Tucson, Lee Oler, has a question for you.
Oh, esteemed. Oh, I love that. I was off already. Nice to meet you, Rocky.
Yeah.
I haven't had much to do with Ward 5 in a while, but my question to start off, do you have the same chief of staff down there that Mr. Frimbers had?
I do. Folks sometimes will come to me and say, "Oh, how's Mark?" And I'm like, "Mark hasn't worked here in a while, but it's Lupita Robles, and she's been our chief of staff for the last couple of years, and she is likely to be in that same role throughout the entirety of my term and probably even into the next." Um, she's phenomenal, and honestly, I would not be able to have stepped into this so comfortably without her. So,
Right. Chiefs of staff are excellent, and you have a good staff, so that will help you a lot.
yeah.
Make your way through this maze. I wanted to ask how I got my 2 electric bills. One was $42 for the month. The other was $120 with nobody living in that house. And I have solar and the other house doesn't. So how's solar doing as far as the city is concerned? Is there any action on getting more solar? Which would help Lillian's question too about the rise in electricity bill.
Yeah, so what's happening right now with the franchise agreement with the Tucson Electric Power is the single opportunity that the city has to, I think, levy its power to have mandates on investments in solar and other clean energy infrastructure, things like that. And so right now, Mayor Romero, in collaboration with a number of different groups that are interested in this topic, are really working to solidify what that agreement looks like. TEP is not happy with it. TEP has fought us every step of the way, and TEP is likely going to fight with us in the future. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have in the last mayor and council meeting have approved that franchise agreement so that way we would have the language needed for a measure on the ballot come the November election. And unfortunately, it won't make it. So we're going to have to invest some extra dollars to have a special election on this front for whatever
Mm.
language is passed come early next year. So, I think there's a lot of conversations around, um, uh, to your point, specifically solar, but to Lillian's point, relative to the potential cost of residents when it comes to energy consumption, I think are two different conversations. I think they can be understandably intertwined to folks, particularly given the conversation around TEP's 14% proposed increase request to the Arizona Corporation came the same day that the county had approved the land agreement for the data center and us in talking about the franchise agreement with TEP. I think that was a very unfortunate move on TEP's part that I think is going to be to their detriment at every level. So,
I agree. I agree. TEP needs to realize that we pay for this stuff and that they don't get everything they want. But I mean, I just told you what my two bills for the month of, well, part of June and little of May was 42 for my house and 120 something for a house that nobody lives in. So solar is cheaper. And we need to, or less expensive to pay for, and we need to actually get it up on the roofs and any other flat surface that we can get it on. I had one other question for you. Nobody's after me, so if you don't mind, I'll ask you.
yeah, and then
You
I'm
know,
gonna have to run after this, friends.
oh, really? Okay. Oh, it's 1 o'clock. I'm sorry.
No worries.
The vote on where the homeless can stay and not stay, e.g. the washes and stuff. How did you come up? Did you vote on that?
I did.
And how did you come up with your vote? What
So,
made you vote the way you did?
so that one was, I would, and I think after the fact and talking with my colleagues, I said that was really rough, and I think they all were in agreement that that was probably one of the roughest votes that they've had in their time. So that brought me a little bit of comfort. Um, for me, that's the one vote that had been, I think, really what ultimately prompted my predecessor's departure from his council seat, in that was a major vote that he ultimately didn't partake in, um, but had the intention of supporting. Um, talking about mandates, when I came in, that was the most um, overwhelming point of conversation with every small business, with every school, with every neighborhood leadership, and all through our emails, through calls, where people were saying, um, we're investing at this very point. Tucson is taking an unprecedented investment in revitalizing parks, recreational spaces. We just launched, or we just broke ground on the Santa Rita Park. We just reopened our pool at Quincy Douglas. These are all within Ward 5. There's more projects underway. If we're going to make those investments, we have to make sure that they stay nice, they stay accessible, they are places for families, to utilize. That being said, I think that for me, the conversation around the homelessness community is really nuanced in that there is obviously folks that are down in their circumstances in this particular moment, given the economic ups and downs over the last 5 years. There's an increasing number of them. There is also an even greater number of folks who are roaming our streets, residing in our parks and washes, as a result of substance misuse. For me, one thing that has driven my experience, and in particular this role, is that my little brother, at the age of 19, I lost him to fentanyl. And for me, he had the familial means to support him in, I think, trying to overcome addiction. But he was one of those people who chose to roam about the community, to, I think, not seek out the resources that were available to him. Um, and so when we talk about who the folks are that are residing in these spaces, not necessarily for shade or cooling, but our building infrastructure and our parks, encampments, that we really needed a way to be able to point folks in the right direction to leverage some of those resources. I still think that the ordinance was not perfect. In fact, I think it was stupid for the reason of the need to respond to the state legislature in particular. But I think when it comes to us responding purely out of needing to point people to resources that are available, this was one means to empower our community health and wellness staff as well as local law enforcement. And so that, that's ultimately what I ended up voting to support.
Okay, so Rocky, how you doing on time? It's
I'm good. I'm good. I can do a couple more minutes. I know there might be some follow-up,
okay.
but
So 108. Andrea, your hand is up, and it's not even electronic.
Oh. Andrea, speak.
her mic is on, but we can't hear her.
Oh,
Damn it.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, we heard that.
Oh, we heard that, of course. Of course you heard that. Live mic. So where are the homeless people going? And are they going into drug rehab? Where are they going?
So, I think right now what I understand, the matter of enforcement is incremental. The ordinance passed, but it wasn't necessarily something that would be enforced immediate. Folks aren't going to be ousted immediately. I think one particular plot of land that is of interest, I think, to some of my other council colleagues is the 100-acre woods, as an example. This is an area that's right next to golf links, or along golf links as you're entering, I think, into the frontage road to get downtown. And that's probably the largest encampment space within the city. I am of the belief that if, they're not there, are we pushing them into residential communities and alleyways? But I think what's of interest here is that there have been fatalities in that area. They're particularly hard for us to clean up given the infrastructure improvements that are going to be underway within that space. And then for our health and community safety staff who have actually gone out trying to afford people some help and resources, we've had city staff who have literally been stabbed. So, I think that I'm coming to this in a dual role as both needing to look at the constituents of Ward 5 in particular, but at a higher level, essentially serving as a glorified board member to a staff of city folks whose health and wellness is realistically our top concern as an employer. And so I think knowing that these people are in a potentially jeopardizing situation, I think makes things a lot harder.
Okay, Lillian, you have the floor.
And I'll probably have to jump off before 1:15, friends.
Okay. Lillian, you just muted yourself.
Thank you. The Pima Point-in-Time survey was just released. That's the survey where they go identify as many homeless people as they can in one day. And we have a ginormous number of people who are homeless. It's huge. And the shelters and homes for them have not kept pace at all. And I would suggest that you may want to look at that and see, because that just came out today. So I would imagine you haven't seen it yet. And I can send it to you and send it to other people, but we have a ginormous problem. It also identifies how many people are either mentally ill or have drug issues. And it's not quite as many people as you would think, but they are definitely probably the hardest group to house.
Yeah, I actually just got the announcement in my email. I'm looking at it now. Because mind you,
Right.
it's the Tucson Pima collaboration, so it's shared between Tucson employs them, but Pima County contributes to this. So yeah, I'll have to
Right.
look into that
And
today.
yeah, the summary, which is a separate attached file, is the most useful because that gives you the numbers and it
Mhm.
shows you how it's increased over time. And the number of homeless has skyrocketed,
Yeah.
from 2018 to now, that it's really increased enormously.
Yeah.
So I think it would be
Okay.
useful for everybody to look at that, including people, the DGT people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the hard parts is, luckily Miramaro really has been kind of the steward of the increase in our capacity to create housing in a number of forms. Um, that is an add-on to our mandate as a city, right? It's beyond our charter. And luckily, we were able to retain some of our investments from the federal government to sustain some of those efforts, but we've also had some withdrawals. And so, this conversation, like every other issue, we can point to our capacity with the federal administration. And so, um, I think the best thing that a number of us can do can continue to kind of fight that fight because this is just one of many ways that there are consequences to these elections. So mind you, the Republicans are so adamant about the Trump administration. They're also simultaneously adamant about us not of us essentially ousting homelessness from the public eye, and we can't do that without the resources. So, you take some, you lose some.
That's great. Rocky, I think I speak unanimously for everyone. What a great presentation
Thank you.
and thoughtful, and you listen to all the questions, the statements. In fact, we have a parting gift for you. We'd like you to come to our happy hour. It's
All
going to be
right.
at Brother John's.
Ooh, I love Brother
It's-
John's.
That's going to be the 16th of this month.
Okay.
So if you'd like to visit with us, we'd love to have you.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.